can have at any of us. Yeah, we saw, I mean, just smaller versions of what has become all too familiar up here from 17 and 18. And that's homes completely destroyed, cars that look like they've been in a war zone, and everything all but melted down except a few curious items. Right next door, a home that's completely untouched. And just the remarkable, just serendipity that is a fire. Then again, there are some that make perfect sense because defensible spaces were provided, there was more green, people had focused on perhaps upgrading some of their materials on their roof, on their decks and the like. But we at this moment, and this is a number that will change, we have 21 structures, individual residential structures rather, that have been impacted, and 28 outbuildings. So yeah, so 28 outbuildings, 21 residential structures that we know of at this moment that have been destroyed. You see vineyards that have been impacted, obviously tremendous amount of land. We'll assess the wildlife damage, but it's a big area, and there are a lot of hot spots still, and there's still a lot of suppression work that's needed, but we are benefiting because of this respite of the winds, and so people are out there as aggressively as they can be for this moment. Well, we'll see. That's what they say. I'm not convinced that that's what they'll end up doing. We have a lot of tools in our toolkit: the Public Utilities Commission, a bankruptcy judge, a federal judge by the name of Judge Alsop, public opinion, morality, ethics, good business practice, judgment. All those things are on our side. Well, that's through the bankruptcy process. In order to come out of bankruptcy, they're trying to recapitalize. They have people from Wall Street that are trying to make a bid. Elliott Management's one of them, well known. They're doing their own internal bid. There's people that are looking at their assets, potentially break them up, gas division versus electric division. Cities like San Francisco are making bids. San Jose, the mayor said he was interested in making bids. So all these things are happening, and that's all part of this bankruptcy process. That's all part of them emerging out of bankruptcy. And my hope is, not just my hope, but our efforts have been focused for many, many months as we've reached out to potential bidders to see more people enter this space and provide creative strategies to modernize this entity and determine whether or not it's simply too big.
But there's no specific plan yet.
Oh, there are details that have been laid out. Specific plans have been presented to the bankruptcy judge. Take a look. The state is not making a bid to purchase PG&E. If that's the question, that is not currently on our agenda. That being said, I said currently on the agenda. Well, I'd lie if I said there wasn't a discussion. There was a discussion, but I would also be errant if I said that discussion was conclusive, meaning that determination and investigation was complete. It is neither determined nor is that investigation complete. This moment in our history where millions of people are impacted throughout the state. But again, I just want to paint a picture because this is the northern part of the state. In Southern California, not dissimilar experience, just not at the scale and scope. Edison is turning off the power. San Diego is turning off the power. San Diego's been doing it since 2007. Interestingly, the new San Diego fire is now occurred in and around where that 2007 fire occurred, where a lot of lessons were learned. I grant San Diego Gas and Electric this. No other utility, arguably in the country, is more successful in their strategies for de-energization. But it is a tool in their toolkit, but they are able to do it with precision, a scalpel, versus the scope and scale of PG&E because they've made investments because they've been more intentional on focusing on you and public safety over them, bonuses, and shareholders. And that's the fundamental contrast between the way they operate and the way Pacific Gas and Electric has operated over the last few decades.
Governor, Sonoma County in particular has been decimated by fire for the past 2 to 3 years. Residents are scared, residents are angry, residents want answers. What reassurances can you give to Sonoma County?
Well, that's why we're up here, and I'd encourage you to rewind everything that was just said in terms of our proactive efforts to pre-position assets, the extraordinary work that everybody you see around me is doing to make sure people are protected and people are made safe. The work that's been doing, people are knocking on every door, looking at every structure. They're tagging those structures to see if they're safe. They're out there doing everything they possibly can. You're going to see more assets as the air clears up. The wind now is dying down, more assets in the air. You've got bulldozers out there. You've got line crews out there. They are already proactively anticipating where the weather is going, the wind conditions, what they'll look like. It is remarkable, our ability to predict with precision the acuity of those winds, the gusts, and then map out and anticipate how best to utilize our resources today so that we can protect people tomorrow.
Governor, the CEO of PG&E, in response to your criticism about the power shutoff, said the state should take over that authority. It should be the state responsibility.
That would be called, Phil, a bailout. It doesn't surprise me that PG&E is looking for a bailout. We will not bail out PG&E. Well, they should be outraged. They should be infuriated. And they should direct their ire at the mismanagement of Pacific Gas and Electric, who for decades have created conditions that led to this moment. That said, what we're anticipating right now, we're down to about, 6,700 customers that are currently de-energized, and we should expect most of those customers to get back on today, probably at the latest, few, I imagine, scattered tomorrow. But we expect more power outages Saturday evening at the moment into Sunday, hopefully turning back on Monday. And we are doing everything in our power to mitigate the scale and scope of that and to make sure that they turn back the power on as quickly as they can. Let me, on that subject, make a point that's important to make. When the determination to turn back on power is made, you can't do it unless you investigate the lines to make sure that they're safe. And that takes time. What we have done, so you know where the state has been, we are providing air resources, infrared technology, so even during nighttime, the California Highway Patrol and its planes can do a lot of that investigation to supplement the work that's being done by PG&E, all in an effort to, as quickly as humanly possible, get those lights back on. They have specific prescriptive ultimatum. I would encourage you to go back to the legislation we passed in July, which was historic and an heroic effort to get ahead of ourselves before the fire season. In that legislation are specific, measurable roles and responsibilities that we all will play, the state, Public Utilities Commission, the IOUs, the city and counties with support from the state, but more importantly, the utilities themselves that have a $5 billion obligation to invest in public safety, hardening, undergrounding, vegetative management, et cetera, including technology that allows them more precision to de-energize without having to turn off a switch where the entire house goes out, but one room at a time. All of that is laid out in that legislation, legally required if they're ever to access the capital that we're willing to put up to help PG&E get out of bankruptcy and secure the other IOUs so that they can go out in the bond markets with higher ratings and be able to access capital to complete their improvements. I don't mean to complicate this, but we spent 6 months on a daily basis working to put together that package, and I cannot impress upon you more to look at what now is required. We're not reacting to this moment. We specifically laid out a framework and a direct pathway for them to get back to solvency and get back into the business of being a good business. Anybody else?
Could you or the team talk a little bit more about the complications you're facing fighting fire when you don't have power? How that makes it more difficult?
I'll leave that to the expert.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you for the question. So fighting the fire with power shutoff, it doesn't change a lot of the firefight itself. Communication flow, and particularly communication flow with the public, is where the bulk of the challenge is. Sonoma has worked diligently to better inform the public through early morning systems. And so some of that is happening here. Some of that still needs to be built out and brought to bear in other parts of the state. But in general, the actual act of firefighting is not a difficult process with the power out. We usually are fighting fire with the power out because fires take out the power as well. There is something that's important to know, though. We have critical infrastructure for firefighting that when there's no power makes it difficult to do. For instance, retardant plants at air bases. They require power to churn and mix the retardant, pump it into the airplanes that drop the retardant. The important thing here is that we know this. We put generators in place. We're ready to go. So we flip the generator on. We mix the retardant. We pump the retardant. Doesn't matter if the base is out of power. So these are things that the state has leaned forward. We've been working with the utilities, understanding that this was going to happen potentially over the last 8 or 10 months, and knowing that there are places where we're going to have to do those kind of things. We have, and that is how we're getting around some of the power-related issues.
Hey, Chief, I have a question. I was talking to a couple of firefighters the other day who mentioned they were having some difficulty accessing water because there are a lot of private water sources as opposed to in a municipality they can just tap into. Can you speak to that?
And that is a typical issue when we're talking about wildland fire. Wildland fire is different than municipal fire, and we have had fires running into municipal areas. It's part of the reason we need to get people out of the way, because we're not just fighting a fire in a structure that might spread to another structure. We're talking about a conflagration that's coming into a town. People need to be out of the way. We can't ensure that we're going to be able to save every one of those structures. We're going to try, but we can't ensure. Number one is people, lives, and property. Second. Then, so the water source is something that we often deal with, and it's not something new to us. There are certain systems that require power to remain charged and keep the tanks full that then enter the system, and we are adept at working through that. Doesn't change the fact that there could be a group of firefighters that are trying to find water during an event, and they may not be able to do that or may not be able to find sufficient water. But that is something that we deal with regularly, and we adapt and overcome.
Can I take advantage of this question being posed to the sheriff proactively? Because, Sheriff, we want to anticipate Saturday night,
Yes.
Sunday, and what we should expect from a public safety perspective and how you guys are doing heroic work.
Thank you. My name is Mark Essick. I'm the sheriff of Sonoma County. So some of the things that we've taken proactive steps on to deal with power outages is kind of going back to the older style. We've equipped all of our patrol cars with the high-low siren. So we are able to get out into neighborhoods, knock on doors, and do evacuations without having to have technology, without having to have power. So that's the most basic step we've taken. We've really leaned into that. Currently, we have over 50 deputies in the Geyserville area and the hills east of Geyserville. They are there right now to help people evacuate. They're there to answer questions, be there for them, provide direction, and when the time comes, to use those high-low sirens to evacuate people.